Well, we're here today with Scott Bush, CEO of the Society for American Baseball Research. Thank you, sir, for your time today. Just wanted to give folks a preview of your upcoming analytics conference, March 10th to 12th in Phoenix, and maybe walk forward a little bit to your 51st convention, July 5th to 9th in Chicago.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks for having me, and happy to chat about both our big conferences.
So what's on tap? And I'm curious how you've kind of navigated through the pandemic and maybe applied some lessons learned, new methodology, things like that.
If we go all the way back, the 2020 conference, the 2020 analytics conference was held the weekend the world shut down. I have distinct memories of being at home, working on some things, and we were already in the midst of pivoting towards virtual because we'd heard from a number of people, many of whom were overseas, specifically Korea, Italy, and Japan, who were saying they didn't think that they were going to be allowed to travel. And so we had started to make preparations to be able to stream the conference, and thank goodness we'd gotten a little bit of a head start because it wasn't long before we had to do that. And it worked out incredibly well, actually. And it gave us a lot of confidence in holding an entirely virtual conference in 2021, which is what we ended up doing. What we saw was a lot of flexibility in schedules. People were still at home. We're still in a weird place in terms of team personnel and whether they were even going spring training and things like that. And so we really had a lot of flexibility on speakers and research presenters and a lot of interest in being involved. And we had incredibly high participation levels, which was great. And alongside that, we made a very deliberate choice to see if we could be even more aggressive price point for students, try to make it even more, more affordable comparatively to general attendance. And that worked out incredibly well also. So what we ended up seeing in 21 and 22 were student participation levels that really unprecedented for us throughout the organization. So, last year, 2022, we had almost 1,000 students participate in the analytics conference. So we're maintaining a virtual opportunity for students specifically. So this year we're back in person. We're offering that experience, and a lot of people love to take advantage of the networking. And so we want to offer that, but we're also going to make virtual attendance possible. And we're specifically offering that to students only for this year.
Excellent, excellent. You mentioned the global reach of your membership. You are the Society for American Baseball Research. I'm just kind of curious, how do you collaborate maybe with other partners in and around the game of baseball to tell the global story of the game?
It's not necessarily about partners. It is mostly about our research committees. And so, the committee chairs who lead some of our some of those research committees. So for specifically, we have a Japanese baseball research committee and a Latino research baseball committee, of which there's actually an additional group sort of launching underneath that specific to Cuban baseball research, which is very exciting. But it's through those research committees that we are able to go 1,000 miles deep, right? So I think of SABR in terms of the breadth and depth of opportunity, and anybody who wants to stay relatively surface level about all topics in baseball, you have that opportunity, right? So if you want to be 1,000 miles wide and an inch deep, you can do that all day long, and you can go across the organization. If you want to be an inch wide and 1,000 miles deep, you can do that too, right? And it just becomes a matter of what you're most interested in and what you kind of want to make your experience out to be.
For folks who may not know about the breadth and depth of the SABR mission and method, I mean, we've come a long way from the days of Henry Chadwick and Alan Roth and even the Cooperstown 16, or the coining of the term Sabermetrics in 1980. And there is that guide to sabermetric research. Could you kind of nutshell for folks, what you do and how you do it and how you refine your methodology?
SABR's mission, and I'm not going to state it verbatim, right? But I'm going to state it in the terms that most people would understand it, is to support and encourage research of the game of baseball without any restriction on the domain, the research domain, right? So if a group of members come together and they say that they want to launch a research committee studying ballpark beer deals in the course of history, sure, fine, right? Like we'd love to learn more about that, right? Typically, most of our research committees are a lot more serious than that, right? And maybe a little bit more academically rigorous than that would be. But SABR's role in all of that is to be a hub of activity for a community of researchers, right? And so everything that we do is designed around supporting that community, providing that community with more resources and more bandwidth to accomplish things, and then also shining a light on their work. And that part typically is where the staff role really intersects with what the researchers are doing, because for us to shine a light on that research, that means we're either going to publish something in a research journal or a book that we launch, or maybe it's an online publication, or we're going to provide an opportunity to present that research in front of an audience at a conference, whether that's the Saber Analytics Conference, whether that's our national convention, or one of our committee research committee driven conferences like our Women in Baseball Conference or the Jerry Malone Negro League Conference.
In terms of statistical methodology, I mean, we know the term sabermetric, and there are all these great stats out there. Do you use or specify your committees to use kind of accredited or generally accepted best practices? Is it all off the shelf, pure statistical analysis, or is there a combination of kind of some proprietary methodology as well?
Yeah, so we have very limited proprietary statistics and metrics. What I would say to a question that's specific to statistical analysis is to actually zoom back out and say any research domain, anything that you want to go and you want to research a given topic, you're going to start by looking at previous work, right? So you're going to say, okay, well, this is what was published previously on this topic. This is the direction that their findings took them. Okay. Now, based off of that, what else do I want to know? What was unexplored? What are additional questions that research brought forward, right? And it's no different in the statistical analysis domain, right? And so you can watch this sort of through line in the statistical analysis world of how those things have improved over time, where the major breakthroughs were along the way. So for example, Bill James and linear weights, introducing things like that. And then you kind of go along and you're working with things in a certain way. And then you have a guy like Voros McCracken who introduces fielding independent pitching, right? You go, okay, wow, this is a big breakthrough. And now we've done a ton, right? There's been a ton of research written based off of that concept over the years. And so rather than there being this edict that the organization is delivering, it's more about, consistency in terms of start with previously existing research, use that as foundational information, build off of those things.
And it's great. You mentioned you've got so many students, kind of entering the field. I'm just wondering, how have sabermetrics, how has this advanced analysis really helped the game move forward and help fans enjoy the game or understand it more?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of an existential question, and I think it gets at the heart of a lot of things that we see debated on a regular basis about style of play, right? And I think it's fair to ask questions about whether it's ever been in the interest of player analysis to care about the style of play, right? One is aesthetic, and the other is incredibly scientific. And science sometimes can be beautiful, but other times it's not, right? And it's not a stated goal. But at the same time, it represents challenges, right? And if you ignore the issues that have cropped up, you are going to eventually you run the risk of creating a product that no one wants. And that's kind of the intersection at which I think Major League Baseball finds itself today. And I think a lot of this comes back to people very naturally don't want to, it's not necessarily that they're afraid, but they don't want to have this game in front of them that they've been a part of since they were a kid. They don't want to be confronted with, there's a lot you don't know, right? What you prefer is the familiarity. What the way that you want to experience the game is in that familiar thing. It's the couch cushion that you've sat on for 10 years, right? It's comfortable. You know it, right? It's lived in. And that's baseball. And people want to continue to have that lived in feel with baseball. And so when the consumption experience, when I say that, I'm talking about when you watch the game on TV, or when you read about it, or listen to it on the radio, or you're there in the ballpark, right? What you want is that lived in feeling. You want that lived in experience. And so the more that you get things that are not part of that, the more it leads you to sort of want to reject the experience, in my opinion. And so while there is a greater understanding today than ever before in baseball history about how the game is played, why certain things work the way that they do, what can be most effective, sharing those things it has limiting returns, right? So the more you share, the less people necessarily want it, right? Which is it's an interesting dichotomy for sure.
Sure. And I mean, there are always those folks who really want to, like you said, really go an inch wide and 10,000 miles deep, and you really want to parse that data. And certainly, game designers and game players fall into that category. I'm just curious, for you, what are some of the most important sabermetric data points, and what to you might be some sleeper stats that folks might want to pay more attention to?
Yeah. So another way to ask this question, I get asked this a fair amount. Like I was asked at winter meetings during a session with students, give me one stat. So you get one stat to follow for the year, and I quickly followed up. I said, well, I get one for batting and one for pitching, right? So my favorite statistics on the batting side, weighted runs created plus. Because it's on a 100 scale, right? So 100 base. So if you're 100 for the year, you're a perfectly average hitter for your position, right? And it's positionally adjusted, it's ballpark adjusted, everything's baked into it, right? So it's a really, really great thumbnail guide of like, what kind of hitter is this person? And you see, oh, he's 105 weighted runs created plus for the year. Fantastic. He's 5% better than average. So he's basically an average hitter. And then you see the guy next to him in the lineup, 140. Fantastic. Now I know, right? And you don't have to go any deeper than that if you don't want to. You just have a base level understanding of this is the percent better or worse than league average that this hitter is. And if you don't want to know more, great. You don't have to know how he got there, right? You can just leave it there. So I love that one. And then essentially the pitching equivalent of that is ERA plus. So ERA is challenging because ERA in any given season, the run environment can change so drastically that you can look at a 1 year total and it will have no relation to the next year's total because of external factors, right? It had nothing to do with the player's performance, or very little to do. ERA plus fixes that by, again, making everything a 100 scale, normalizing for ballpark factors, and you get a nice little, again, thumbnail sketch of percent compared to league average. And it's another great place to be, right? You don't need to know how they got there. You don't need to know, oh well, they release every pitch within 6 inches of the same place, right? You don't need to know that. So there you go. Those are my two favorites. Those are ones I follow for the most part.
Excellent, excellent. In terms of kind of changing conditions and that great debate, trying to normalize or assess players era to era, dead ball, various playing styles, as you're talking about, can you point to some statistics or methods that kind of nail down the art of that science? Has there been a definitive way to compare who played against whom and who could play today on today's field and today's conditions and all that? I mean, is that the impossible goal?
Yeah, and I don't know that anyone is I don't know that it's to anyone's benefit to get there either. One of the things that I struggle with is comparing WAR across generations, right? Because to me, at a certain point, you're really just like ranking players, and things like that are, personal opinion, incredibly reductive across history, right? If you're sitting in a front office, it's your job to figure out if you think one guy is better than the other, and whether or not you want to acquire that player so that you can improve your team, right? As fans, I would much rather sit from the perspective of, it's great to know how good they were in the time that they played, right? What goes in my memory is not that, right? It's, I remember watching them play, if I was fortunate enough to watch them play, and these are the memories that I had of that player, right? And I don't find it particular to, just me personally, I don't find it particularly fun or interesting or engaging to get into those more historical debates of like, oh well, was Josh Gibson the greatest catcher who ever played? I don't know, possibly, right? But like, the things that are more fun to think about with Josh Gibson are not that.
Interesting. Well said. Well said. Perhaps, however, going down that rabbit hole a bit, just curious, if you could put any starting nine in history on a diamond today to win a series, you could guarantee a series, a Namath like Super Bowl guarantee, if you would, who would you choose?
Do they also get their home field?
Sure.
Okay, great. I'll take the 91 Twins in the Metrodome.
All right. There you go. Easy.
if you give that team that ballpark, I think they'll do okay.
All right. All right. Easy answer. Very nice. Very nice. Now back to the analytics conference. For those who've never attended, what might they expect and what's kind of new in the fold this year?
Yeah. You get cutting edge research presentations in this research domain. So you're getting people who are doing work that teams are interested in. Front offices show up because they want to learn, right? And they want to see work of other people, and people get hired from presenting at this conference. It's a very cool thing to be a part of for that reason, right? And I spoke to earlier about supporting the community, and that's one of the things that we can do, is help make those connections between people who are part of the research community and want to be working in the industry, and helping build those bridges is definitely part of this conference. Aside from the research presentations, we try to be really engaging with topics that are relevant today. So we have a number of panel discussions set up for this year. And the one that I'm particularly excited about is discussing rules changes, right? So we've got rules that are going to govern the way the game is played this year, and they're pretty sizable changes compared to how things have operated the last few years, and particularly governing where fielders are allowed to be positioned, governing pitch clocks, size of the bases, which it really depends on who you talk to in terms of how much of an impact that could have. So those things are going to genuinely affect also how people watch the game, how you consume the game. So hearing people talk about that, we've got Kyle Glazer from Baseball America, who covers prospects, goes to a lot of minor league games, has seen a lot of these changes in person. Dallas Braden, former pitcher of the A's, currently works on their broadcast. Bobby Scales, former big league outfielder who now works for Sports Info Solutions, is also on this panel. And it's being moderated by Rob Maines from Baseball Prospectus. So that'll be very engaging. I'm very excited about that. I'm excited about all the panels always, but the rules changes panel for me this year is really relevant, and I think if you're looking for, what is this conference about and what are the sorts of things, I think this is really representative of that.
Excellent. Well, and again, speaking of rules, that kind of gets to eras and styles of play. And I'm just kind of curious if you had someone who said, I'm not really a baseball fan, what era might you point them to say, this era perfectly encapsulates what I feel is the essence of the game of baseball?
Oh, I don't know if there's a good answer to that, Jeff. I think most people are going to say that it was the era of baseball when they were somewhere between 12 and 16 years old, regardless of how old they are now, right? So for me, I guess that would be basically the year after the strike until about like 98. So yeah, there's my answer, which is probably, and to be fair, if you took 98 specifically, you would get one of the great home run chases of all time, which was incredibly entertaining. There's literally there is no disputing how entertaining that season of baseball was at the time.
Speaking of catalyzing moments, of course, you've got the Field of Dreams game now. You had Aaron Judge's season. What is kind of the state of the sport now, and even going down as far as the state of the farm system and the minor leagues and the feeder systems into the majors?
Yeah, boy, how much time do we have? So I think the sport overall is incredibly healthy right now, because I think that the players that we have are the most talented that we've ever experienced. And within that, I think people who are worried about style of play are missing out on some really great players. And I'm hopeful that enough minor changes happen within style of play that people get back into focusing on how good these guys are and how young some of the superstars are. Julio Rodriguez last season put up one of the great rookie years of all time. And when you look at historically, players who are that young who put up that kind of season, boy, that's lofty company. So I'm just so excited to watch players like him, watch players like Fernando Tatis Jr. get back and be out there. We have a two-way player right now who's an absolute superstar. Ohtani is just amazing on both sides, right? So I feel like the overall health of the game is incredible. And, when you look at, you touched on the farm system, we will have a brief gap because of the COVID year. You look at the 2020 draft, it was 5 rounds. And we just simply had less talent enter the development system in a 1-year period. Now, The teams will be able to paper over that a little bit by tracking guys a little bit more quickly, but we are going to have we'll have a little hiccup, right? But the overall trend line in terms of the ability of teams to locate and develop talent and get them to the big leagues at a relatively young age, right now is really strong. And other than that little 1 year gap that I talked about, there's really no reason to suspect that that's going to stop.
Excellent, excellent. In terms of Saber membership, what are some of the great benefits and why should people sign up now?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, the chance to give the sales pitch. You know, I mentioned before it's a community, right? Well, within a community, people experience that in different ways, right? It's no different than wherever your hometown is, right? Anybody's hometown, everybody who lives there has a different thing that they think is the best, right? So, you know, for researchers, we have a ton of different research tools that members have access to, right? Including paper of record. We've also got access to newspapers.com, and then Saber has its own databases that we maintain that people have access to as well, along with you know, when you join a community like this, you gain access to be able to interact with other people who are really strong researchers themselves, who can give you a lot of direction on what you may be working on. Other people enjoy more of the consumption aspect. You know, Saber puts out 3 research journals a year, 2 under our baseball research journal masthead and 1 under the national pastime. In addition to that, we publish typically 8 to 10 books per year. Members get all of that stuff for free, along with this killer newsletter, killer weekly newsletter that really gives you, here's your digest of what's going on in the world of Saber and the world of baseball in the last week. So, you know, the consumption side is very strong amongst our membership. So if you're just a fan and you're going, I don't know if Saber's for me, I promise it is. I promise that there's something for you. And then we also provide great discounts to attend our events. So if you find yourself going, yeah, I'd like to, you know, I feel like I would want to go to events and stuff like that, just join. It's going to save you money in the long run. But the final aspect, any community, right, is the social. You know, so the opportunity to interact with relatively like-minded individuals who are really passionate about baseball is a really great opportunity. And many people take advantage of that at the chapter level. We've got 85 chapters worldwide, I think, and growing. And then along with that, coming out to events, whether it's convention, the analytics conference, the Women in Baseball conference, just getting the chance to spend time with people who spend a lot of time thinking about baseball and love to talk to other people who spend a lot of time thinking about baseball.
It is a comprehensive constellation, to be sure. Any last thoughts about Saber's mission going forward, new projects that you can share or expect to finalize this year?
Yeah, we got a couple of cool things in the hopper at the moment. So last year we launched an analytics certification course. It was course 1. If you are new to analytics, just want to know enough to be able to speak to what people are trying to talk about or what's being shared in an article in The Athletic, and you just want to know more, it's a great way to really speak the language, right? I think of it as analytics literacy, really. We will be launching our second course hopefully in the next month or so, and that course gives people the opportunity to do, again, more of a deep dive of like, here's how these things are developed. And the second course is primarily designed for people who want to get on a path, you know, to knowing a lot about this. But it's still, I would sort of call this like a 102, right? If the first course is 101, this is 102. We're going to get to 201 with the third course. We're going to get to 301 with the fourth course. But you know, 101, 102 worth most fans' time, and we'll have that launch later this year. The other project that we're in the middle of, we announced this a few weeks ago. Saber received a donation of the Rucker Baseball Photo Archive, which longtime member Mark Rucker, who has done a lot of consulting for the Hall of Fame and for Ken Burns on the baseball documentary, had in his possession, his control. We are digitizing the entire collection. It's more than 77,000 baseball image objects, spanning from the 19th century and across all different types of research domains, right? So we have Negro League images, we have All-American Girls Professional Baseball League images, we have Cuban baseball images, we have Japanese baseball images, and of course we have a lot of Major League Baseball images inside of this archive. So we've actually already scanned everything, and we're currently in the process of migrating those images over to our website at saber.org. And then the final step here is actually cataloging the collection. And so we have a group of volunteers who are working on cataloging 10 Hall of Famers. And if you ask me the names, I'm not going to come up with all 10, so don't ask me. But we will have those 10 fully cataloged by opening day. And we're doing that more so that people can see what the power of the collection will be when it's fully cataloged. But at opening day, we will make the entire collection live and available for folks. So it'll just be harder to search because not everything will be cataloged. But this is really a living research project, Jeff, because people will be able to add information about these images over time, right? So if you go in there and you say, oh, okay, this is a great picture of Tony Stone and the Indianapolis Clowns, right? And maybe our folks initially only recognized 5 of the 6 people in the photo, and maybe you know who the 6th is, right? You will have the ability to submit that information, and we can get that added as part of the data on the site.
Awesome. Awesome. Never a better time for Saber, it sounds like.
It is an exciting time. It is an exciting time, and I appreciate you letting me share about it.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your insights. Everyone get out there to Phoenix and plan for Chicago as well.